Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to MusicForever, where today I'll be reviewing Linkin Park's second remix album, Recharged. Alright folks, before we begin the actual review that I have here today, I just want to remind anyone who may be new to my channel that I'm reviewing all of Linkin Park's albums here on my channel. So if you're a Linkin Park fan, you can check out the playlist I have in the description below, as well as it'll be on screen here at the end of the video. You can check out that playlist where it has all my reviews that I've done so far that are related to Linkin Park and just other Linkin Park related videos, things like that. That's all in that playlist, so I highly recommend that you check that out because, Linkin Park is great. But now that I got that out of the way, let's start with this actual review here today of their second remix album, Recharged. Now, on the surface, really, with this album, just kind of looking at it, you might think that it's sort of a spiritual successor to their first remix album, Reanimation, because both albums kind of take a previously existing Linkin Park studio album and change them to be, a remix album, pretty much. Reanimation was, of course, a remix album of their first album, Hybrid Theory, whereas this is a remix album of their most recent album at the time, Living Things. Now, of course, that's really where the similarities end for the most part, because both of these albums decide to remix their respective source material in a very different style. Like I said in my review for Reanimation, that album was remixing more in a hip-hop sort of fashion, whereas this album here is doing sort of an electronic dance music sort of remix, a more, I guess you could say, typical remix that's more modern, I would have to say. It's kind of going along with that sort of electronic dance music craze that was popular back when this album was released back in 2013. I vividly remember, as well as I guarantee anyone else who was kind of into music at that time, probably remembers that back in 2013, 2012, that this type of music was everywhere. It was inescapable pretty much. And ever since, really, it's kind of died off to an extent. I mean, electronic music still is there, of course, but this exact style that they're going with here on this remix album, for the most part, is kind of a thing of the past for the most part. And that's kind of the first complaint I have with this project for the most part, is that it sounds somewhat dated, even though it's not even that old. It's only 4 years old. Yet it sounds like it's dated already because it's kind of a part of a sound that's already come and passed for the most part. However, even though that is kind of a problem with this album that I have, it does still sound rather modern in just the production and just the electronic sound that it has. And of course, like I said, it's only 4 years old, so it is a relatively new album still. But still, going back to this album, it's arguably one of my least favorite Linkin Park releases overall, just because compared to a lot of their other albums, or even Reanimation or the Collision Course EP that they did with Jay-Z, I just feel like there's not a lot on this project to go back to for the most part. And that's kind of the thing about this project. It kind of lets me down in the regard that there's not a lot here that's really worth investing my time in, I feel. Starting off this project, before we get into any actual remixes, however, we have a brand new track, The Light That Never Comes, which is kind of a collaboration between Linkin Park and kind of electronic music producer Steve Aoki, who the two kind of collaborate here on this track, and I actually think this is a pretty good song in my opinion. I could definitely understand why a lot of people wouldn't like it, because it does take Linkin Park and kind of combine them with the sort of dubstep sound that was really popular back at this time period. But overall, I think it ends up actually being pretty good for what it's worth, at least. I feel like the Linkin Park aspects of the song, the lyrics, the vocals, and all those elements are very much Linkin Park here. It feels like this song could have fit onto Living Things, for example, lyrically and just in terms of the song structure, had the electronic elements been toned down a bit more. But of course, Steve Aoki's part, the more electronic elements are, still there, of course, and it does kind of create an interesting Linkin Park song, because it is really the only original Linkin Park song to kind of have a sound like this, and by original I mean not a remix for the most part. Then of course, after this song ends, which is really the best song on the album in my opinion, you have all these remixes for the most part. And this is a long album also, I just want to say. It's over an hour long, and you have a lot of tracks here on this album. And a thing I don't really like about it is that it's not just a remix of every track, kind of like how Reanimation was to Hybrid Theory. There are some tracks here that are repeated, in terms of the amount of remixing that they get. I'll Be Gone and Until It Breaks are the two tracks here that have two remixes to them, which I found a bit odd. And also, A Light That Never Comes, besides having the normal version of the track that plays at the beginning of the album, you have the Rubin Reboot at the end here of the album, which is just pretty much another remix of the song. So you also hear that track twice here on this entire album. And that's not to say that the remixes don't sound different from the originals, or that the two remixes don't sound different from each other. It's just that on this track listing, I really could have dealt with these repeats being cut out and just having like a remix of every single track on here and have that be the final product. The album still would have been long enough, so I don't understand why they didn't do that. Because on Reanimation, that album, it only remixed every track. And while it did also tap into the bonus tracks from Hybrid Theory, which I don't believe there were any bonus tracks for Living Things, but still, this album didn't really need those extra remix tracks that were just repeating previous songs, or the A Light That Never Comes remix, even though the original was already at the start of the album. It just seemed a bit redundant in my opinion, and overall it was just, kind of pointless overall, I felt. And as far as the rest of these tracks go, in terms of the actual sound, many of these tracks here bring in outside DJs to kind of remix the songs. Some of them are remixed by Mike Shinoda himself of Linkin Park. And overall, like I said before, they're going for this kind of electronic music sound that was popular at the time period. So you have lots of like cut up parts here and there. You have heavy drops that at times become rather aggressive in their sound. Just kind of look at the one on Lost in the Echo, the remix of that track, which is a rather aggressive remix of sorts. And it does become a bit annoying at times, but I can see where they were coming from, given that Lost in the Echo was one of the more aggressive tracks on Living Things. I felt some of these remixes are definitely more like laid back and things of that sort, but they still do have that electronic flair to them. And another thing is that a lot of these tracks are also rather long in length, like far longer than their original tracks were. Some of these tracks being like 5 or 6 minutes long, which isn't something that I'm against really. I'm not against long songs or anything. But here, it's just not super interesting, and I feel like these tracks just go on a bit longer than they need to. But of course, that complaint about the song length really also has to do with my fact that I'm just not a big fan of longer electronic music tracks for the most part. So I guess that does in part have something to do with it. And just as a general statement here, that I think a big part of the reason why I'm not a big fan of this remix album is simply that I'm not a big fan of the style of music that they're kind of remixing these songs to be like a part of. I'm not a super big fan of this electronic music that was popular at the time. That's not to say I don't like electronic music like as a whole. There are many groups and artists in that genre that I enjoy, but this specific style of music isn't exactly my favorite, and that's kind of why I feel like it's not a project that I really can connect to and relate to all that much. Whereas Reanimation, I felt like was remixing a style that I did enjoy, and that's why I like that project a lot more. That's just kind of a general disclaimer, I guess, for this review, because I definitely do feel like that's a big reason why I do prefer Reanimation to Recharge. However, that's not to say that there aren't some legitimate complaints that I do have with this album as well. Yet there's also some things that are done well here. Take for example some of the guest features that are provided here, and just some of the new verses and things like that that they managed to throw in lyrically here as well, kind of like they did on Reanimation. And that's one thing I praised about that album, and I have to praise it here as well. Some of the new verses that appear and just lyrical parts are very nice as well, and they do fit within the context of the original songs that they're being based off of. And the same goes to the verses provided by some of the guest rappers that appear here as well. All the lyrics that they provide and things like that do kind of fit within the context of what the original song was like about and what it was really like going for, I feel. I don't feel like they just came here and provided a completely random off-topic guest verse that had nothing to do with the song originally. I feel like they were still kind of keeping it in bounds for what was like the song's main topic. And that's one thing I did enjoy about it. But overall, I'd have to say that Recharged is just, not exactly the worst thing in the world. It's just kind of forgettable in the grand scheme of things when it comes to Linkin Park. Whereas in my Reanimation review, I said that Reanimation was an album that I think I like even more than Hybrid Theory, just because I think it's a brand new and interesting way to relook at that album. I feel like Recharged, while it is a new way to look at that album, it's just a slightly less interesting and slightly less to the point way of looking at the album. And as a result, I really don't find myself coming back to it all that much. And, of course, like I said before, I'm not a big fan of this style of music to begin with, so that just kind of makes sense as well. Now, of course, I think many fans at the time of this album's release, while many fans didn't like it, of course, the reason why I don't think fans completely flipped like some of them did when One More Light was released was pretty much because this was a remix album. It was kind of off to the side, and they knew that, whatever came next studio album-wise could be completely different, which it was pretty much. The Hunting Party, which, we'll be talking about here soon, was very much in the complete opposite direction of Recharged, and really that just has to do with Recharged being, its own kind of separate thing on the side. Not really worth getting angry over if you don't like it, but if you do enjoy it, good for you. Pretty much, yeah, I think it's just an average project overall. It sits easy enough when you're listening to it. It's not something that I would be against listening to again, but, after listening to it initially when it was released, and as well for, when it was initially released and things like that, it just didn't really, doesn't interest me all that much. Though I will say, again, that A Light That Never Comes is a good track, and definitely a track that I do find myself coming back to from time to time. It's just really the rest of this album that I don't really care for all that much. But then again, that's really all I have to say about this project. So if you enjoyed the review, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, comment down below your thoughts on this remix project, follow me on all the social medias linked in the description, and stay golden, guys!